Hello everybody, my name is Rachel and welcome to my channel Colonati. Today I am going to talk perhaps briefly, perhaps incoherently because I have not prepared prior, about Ursula K. Le Guin's Always Coming Home, which was first published in 1985. I would start off by saying that I don't think this is a novel. I'm not exactly sure what the definition of a novel is, but this probably isn't a novel. It reads more like a collection. It's an anthropological collection of the stories, poems, and information about a culture called the Kesh, which may be going to exist in the far future in the Pacific Northwest. The actual convoluted sentence that describes the temporal conditions of the Kesh is, the people in this book might be going to have lived a long time from now in Northern California, which is the first sentence of a first note in this book. It is archaeological, anthropological, perhaps ethnographic, and it is about the future, but all the stories are written as if this was the past or the near present. While reading it, I had a hard time thinking about this as a future society because I'm used to science fiction that is really far future and is always about technology and science and progress and how far we've advanced and then how far we've fallen. That's not really what the Kesh are like. I would describe the Kesh as a far future Native American inspired people living in a gentle dystopia. It is clearly post-apocalyptic. There are hints that there's very advanced technology, perhaps artificial intelligence, a whole city of technology, of electronic minds that are like sending probes out to the stars and stuff. But most people, or at least the Kesh, have disengaged from technology, choose to not use it, to not use the exchange for far communication with other communities and such. This just doesn't feel like what I think a far future science fiction story should be like. And I hesitate to even think of this as science fiction now that I have read it, because it doesn't seem to have that science fictional feel to it. And that is probably my personal taste saying that the Native American style of this culture far more influenced my experience of this book than any other SF-nal elements it might have. So far I haven't told you what the story is about because there isn't just one story. I could try to recap everything and that would just take forever, and you probably don't really want to know that. The longest story in here is Stone Telling's life. She's a woman of the Kesh, and her story is probably like a novella-length one, cut up into 4 parts. Stone Telling starts out as kind of a disaffected, uneducated young woman of the Kesh who kind of says at one point that she has been done a disservice by her family and her community who didn't really intercede and give her a better education, but she comes from a pretty dysfunctional family within the Kesh society. Her father is not Kesh, he is of the Condor and doesn't live with their family. And then one day he reappears when she is a teenager, having had some sort of a falling out with her family, very much a rebellious teenager. She insists that he take her with him back to the Condor. And this is my problem with this story. Stone Telling's narrative is a woman from a relatively utopian society that very much values women, goes to a patriarchal war machine society that literally believes women do not have souls and categorizes them with animals. She goes there, she's stripped of all of her illusions about how wonderful her father's people probably are. She gets married, not exactly against her will, pops out a baby, and then returns home as kind of the prodigal daughter to say, this is how terrible the Condor are, and yeah, Kesh society is pretty nice. Which I am really simplifying things here and being a little bit sarcastic because I didn't really like her story. It was very predictable. Having read other works by Le Guin that kind of hit on these plot points, having read feminist science fiction and fantasy that also hits on these story points. The beats were just too familiar. I knew exactly what was going to happen. The only surprising thing to me is that she returns home relatively unscathed. This is, I think, is supposed to be like the hinge or the linchpin of this book that you can tack on all the other sections to. There's a whole back of the book section, which is like an appendix, which is interesting because the rest of the book could also feel like an appendix. And you could just like read Stone Telling Story and then see all the other portions as an addendum to build up the Kesh culture, to understand where she comes from and what she comes back to. But she was so dull. So I didn't really care for that central story. The best part was the fourth part, the conclusion, when I felt it was a little bit more uplifting, just that the prodigal child returns bit. I liked that. What I actually enjoyed the most about this book were the poetry sections. I haven't read much poetry. I don't really know what I like in poetry. I haven't read enough of it. And I don't think I've really read much of Le Guin's poetry, but she is a poet, and as of right now I believe she's retired from writing fiction and longer works and is only writing poetry. So given that I really enjoyed the poems here, I think I must go out and read some of her poetry in like her collections and see if it's the Kesh poetry I like or if it's Le Guin's style. The final thing that I want to say about this that is probably why I didn't enjoy it as a whole that much is the Native American influence. This is a part of Le Guin's experience in her life that I don't know much about, but as I understand it, her father, maybe both of her parents, were anthropologists. They worked with Native American culture. I think her father wrote a pretty well-known book about a man who was the last of his tribe. And Le Guin, I think, is also really interested in this and has the anthropological background, but the Native American influence, I don't care for. I have never been interested in Native folklore and the stories and the myths and stuff. I don't know that much about it except for coyote stories, basically, and there are a lot of coyote stories in this book. I have never been interested in that, and this is just infused with it. I know just enough to see that it's there, and it doesn't appeal to me. It's not a style of folklore or fantasy, or in this case even like science fiction, that I like. What I will commend this book for is its experimental nature. If I had read this when I was a kid, I think that it would have felt less like disparate parts stitched together, and I would have read it like I gobbled up the Lord of the Rings appendixes and the Silmarillion, because that's what it feels like. Is here's the section on their alphabet, here's a section on their songs, here is some of the music written out, here's what they wore, here's what they ate, here are their origin myths and everything. When I was a kid, that's what I wanted. I would have created that gestalt in my head and it would have been amazing. And I feel like I have lost some of my imagination that would have made this more of a unified whole. But I have to take a step back and look at it now and say, this is very experimental for Le Guin. I can't think of anything else I've read by her that even approaches this level of complexity and breaking outside of the structure or the format that her stories usually take. That's cool, and that must be really hard to write. Always Coming Home is going to go on that short list of things I have read by Le Guin that I probably will never reread, but I'm still glad that I experienced. If you have read this, let me know what you thought of it. What did you get out of it? You know, did you like Stone Telling Story, or were the other parts more interesting to you? And if somebody here has like read this book in 1985 and got the cassette with the music on it and everything, tell me what that was like. 'Cause I want to know, was this like really cool and different in 1985? Because in 2017, there are a lot of multimedia projects out there that the internet has made so easy to make and to make accessible to a lot of people that, you know, packaging a hardcover book with a cassette these days, I don't know about that. So there you go. Always Coming Home by Ursula Le Guin. I'm sorry if this was an incoherent video, but I did my best. Thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you again soon. Bye.